Today, Diane had an appointment with a business partner. She had a lucrative business deal, a new restaurant in the city center. A cooperation agreement had been signed, but there were still a few details to sort out. Besides, Miras was handsome and charming. Diane didn't mind a little affair and invited the man to her restaurant. However, already at the entrance, she realized that the evening wouldn't go according to plan. The manager, with a pale face, flew up to her and started to make confused excuses. Before Diane could understand what the man was babbling about, she saw Janelle, the childhood friend who was dressed provocatively as usual and was acting loudly. Diane had no desire to spoil her evening and make a scene. But with Janelle, not a day went by without a scandal. She knew how to make a big deal out of things. She didn't understand polite requests to leave and turned any meeting into a one-man theater. So Diane decided to hide as quickly as possible. After all, this wasn't her only restaurant to hold a meeting. The restaurant owner jumped out into the street, and Miras' car stopped right in front of her. The woman snorted irritably and headed resolutely to meet the man. She smiled seductively, accepted a compliment about her appearance, and then offered to drive to another restaurant. Miras agreed. Everything was working out just fine, and suddenly, "Diane, darling, hello," came from behind. The woman felt cold, and a painful grimace flashed across her face, but she quickly pulled herself together. "Janelle, lovely to see you," she said with a broad smile. "Oh, what a pity," said Janelle sadly, gazing at the handsome man beside her childhood friend. "I was looking forward to having dinner with you. Maybe your beau wouldn't mind a nice chat together." Janelle flirtatiously fluttered her eyes. "Oh no, you misunderstand," Miras hastened to justify himself. "We are business partners, and I'd love you to keep us company." Diane gritted her teeth, all her plans for a romantic evening down the pan. But to refuse a business partner dinner would be unwise, and to start a quarrel with Janelle in public was at least unseemly. The manager led their company to the best table, where another chair was hastily placed. The conversation was surprisingly pleasant. Janelle wasn't showing off or anything. She carefully imitated an interested conversationalist, sipping her collector's wine and not noticing her friend's sour expression. Miras paid attention to both of them without showing any preference. This annoyed Diane noticeably. Soon, robust wine and irritation hit her head. She had reached the state where any spark would instantly turn into a flame. Later, Diane couldn't remember where that argument started. It seems that they were talking about charity. "Some people are quite far from that," Janelle nodded sadly, glancing sideways at Diane. "What are you implying?" the woman asked suspiciously. "Nothing," she smiled innocently. "I have never seen you feed the homeless." "I think the homeless can feed themselves if they try to find work," Diane replied stiffly. "Where can they find work if no one will hire them?" Janelle pouted. "Diane, could you hire a man from the street to your restaurant?" Miras suddenly intervened. He was looking at her with genuine interest. Yes, she wanted to look perfect in his eyes, so she nodded. Janelle clapped her hands together happily and pointed to the window. "Look, here comes one. I'm sure you'll never get him on staff." "I will," without looking at the passerby. Diane brushed off. "Wager," her friend grinned slyly. "I'll be the judge." Miras enthusiastically took up the idea. "Just don't cheat," Janelle playfully wagged her finger. "You hire this poor guy as a restaurant employee for a month, and we can walk in here any day without warning and catch him at work." "If you win, I'll finance another restaurant of your franchise," Miras suddenly offered. It was a very tidbit of a thing. If she lost, all Diane would have to do was sing at a karaoke bar. She hated such entertainment, but she wouldn't suffer much from fulfilling the conditions. The temptation to win was too great. "I'm going to invite him here right now," the woman said. "Where is he?" Janelle pointed to a man in shabby clothes across the street. Diane got out from behind the desk and went to meet the new employee. She had no idea where she was going to put the ragamuffin, certainly not in the hall or the kitchen. A bet is a bet, but the reputation of the place was paramount. The closer the woman approached the homeless man, the more she doubted her decision. His clothes were obviously someone else's, dirty and torn in several places. His hands were black with mud and dust. Diane stared into the ragamuffin's face and gasped. His hair was like a shred that clearly hadn't been washed in months. His beard was like a wisp, his forehead was covered in a large bruise with clotted blood, and his skin was even coated with a thick layer of soot and street dirt. Diane took a step back against her will. What was she getting herself into? But then, the man looked up at her with his bright eyes. She hadn't seen such a bright and open look in a long time, and froze, looking at the homeless man, who shocked her once again. "Excuse me, can I help you?" the man asked sympathetically. He was immediately embarrassed by his own words and hurriedly added, "You came up and then froze. I have a repulsive look, of course, I know. But I thought if you came up, maybe you wanted to ask for help. If the car broke down, I could give you a push." "No," Diane shook her head. "I wanted to offer to help you. Do you see the restaurant across the street? I'm the owner, and I'd like to offer you a job as a cleaner. But the only condition is that you have to wash and cut your hair, and they'll give you a uniform. Do you agree?" The man couldn't understand what it was all about. He didn't believe in altruism. Diane admitted irritably that the offer was part of an argument. "It's good for you, too," she remarked. "You get a steady job for a month. You can use the showers and eat well 3 times a day. Take it. It's a once-in-a-lifetime offer." The homeless man tilted his head sideways thoughtfully. He didn't want to be the object of an argument, but this strange woman had promised to pay for his work, and scrubbing floors and toilets wasn't the worst thing that had ever happened to him. "I agree," he nodded. Diane rejoiced. She had already won, no matter what Janelle thought. The woman led the new employee behind her, having to walk around the other side of the restaurant so that none of the guests would notice the ragamuffin. Entering the back door, she immediately called the manager and pointed the dumbfounded employee to the homeless man. "This man will be working for us as a cleaner from tomorrow. Instruct him, draw up a contract for a month, and get him cleaned up." Diane considered her mission accomplished and headed back into the hall. The men followed her with glances, then stared at each other. "Look, I don't know what went through her mind," the manager began, "but let's get you some food, and you disappear from here." "I don't think that's a good idea," the homeless man shook his head. "As far as I understand, she's betting big money that she'll hire me. If you kick me out, your employer will be very angry." The manager swore unflatteringly, then handed the homeless man some notes. "If you want to work here, wash and cut your hair and have a shave," he ordered. "Be by the back door of the restaurant at 7 a.m. tomorrow." The homeless man took the money, nodded accordingly, and disappeared. The manager immediately put the incident out of his mind. He thought the homeless man just needed money and wouldn't be here again, and the owner might forget about her whim tomorrow. The next morning, however, the manager was in for a surprise. A stranger with a patch on his forehead was standing at the back door. The smooth-shaven and short-cropped man resembled nothing of the ragamuffin of yesterday. Were it not for the bright, piercing eyes, the manager would have never thought it was the same man. A new employee had to be allowed into the restaurant. The man received his uniform and locker, signed the employment papers, and went to mop the floor of the staff lavatory. The cleaner turned out to be very diligent and competent, carried out all of the orders perfectly, and, by the end of the day, the staff changing room, the corridor, and the toilets were sparkling clean. The manager would be glad to hire such an employee. Moreover, during the day, the owner didn't come and called to inquire about the fate of the new employee. All this infuriated the manager, so he was very picky about the cleaner. But the homeless man put up with all the remarks, unhappy comments, and whispers behind his back. He understood that no one would welcome him with open arms, and it wasn't necessary for him. The main thing was to be fed and paid, and he would do his job well. Diane forgot about the argument right away and didn't show up at her restaurant for a few days, and when she arrived, she was in for another unpleasant surprise. The manager spoke about petty thefts. According to him, food, kitchen equipment, and money from the table in his office started disappearing with the arrival of the new employee. That's when Diane remembered the ragamuffin. She was surprised to see a neat young man diligently scraping the bottom of a huge soup pot. At once, the high stakes of the bet were remembered. If she kicked the homeless man out now, Miras would count it as a loss. Proof was needed. Diane was just contemplating the matter when an old acquaintance sat down at her table. He dealt with their video surveillance systems and was the man who had installed the cameras in the restaurant. The owner shared her desire to record the theft. The acquaintance promised to help, but offered to do it secretly from all the staff. That same night, after the restaurant closed, 2 cars stopped outside the door. The dark silhouettes entered the premises, stayed there for some time, and then drove away. The next evening, a storm broke out. The manager rejoiced that he would soon be rid of the imposed cleaner and have his problem solved. The door to his office opened abruptly, causing the man to jump out. On the threshold, there was a whole delegation led by the employer. Behind her stood police officers, the administrator of the hall, the chef, and the cleaner. "Diane," the manager didn't get confused. "I was just about to call the police and you. I told you he was a thief, and you didn't believe me. Today, I sent that ragamuffin to clean my office, and look at this." He pointed to the open door and an empty safe. "You miscalculated," she remarked harshly. "They put in extra cameras tonight. I saw you emptying the safe with my own eyes and planting several stacks of cash in the cleaner's locker. Well, you know, he noticed it right away and immediately took the money to the hall administrator and asked him to contact me. I got your account statements, too. You wanted to blame it on the homeless guy, but it didn't work. Arrest him!" The cops escorted the former manager out of the restaurant, and Diane thought she had made good on the bet. How long would she continue to be deceived? And thanks to a vagrant from the street, the conspiracy had been uncovered. The restaurant continued its operations with a new, reliable person. The homeless man got a permanent place and was able to pay his rent, leaving the streets for good. Janelle finally stopped going to Diane's restaurants. Miras sponsored the opening of 2 more restaurants in major cities. The affair with her business partner failed, but the woman wasn't upset. She had gained much more in this venture than she had expected to gain. And as they say, never judge a book by its cover. Thanks for listening to the story. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit that like button and consider subscribing to our channel and ring that bell to be notified the moment we have another story to share with you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.